1928. A sealed box for peace. Its promise kept, never opened. In 1928, Warsaw's Naluki Street sold more than bread and buttons. It sold memory. On a wet March morning, a pawnbroker spread a small estate across his table. Watches that would not be wound. Candlesticks with wax arrested mid-drip. A silver kiddush cup that had kissed 100 Sabbaths. Among them sat a wooden wine cabinet no larger than a loaf. Its lid bore pomegranates carved by an unpracticed hand. On the back, Hebrew scratched with a nail, "Do not open." Warnings are common on boxes that once held grief. This one read like a promise. A student from the yeshiva across the river came to price a grammar and found the cabinet instead. He turned it in his hands and felt a draft from a seam where there was no air. Inside were strips of linen that smelled of myrtle and smoke, a braid of hair knotted with red thread, 2 coins pierced by a single pin, a note folded to the size of a thumbnail. The note offered only a date, Elul 5671, and a town name blurred by damp. The pawnbroker told the student a fragment. A wedding broken by war, a bride who kept speaking to someone who was not there, a rabbi whose eyes had the shine of a man who knows the words, but not the price. They had laid the spirit to rest, he said, as if reporting weather. The cabinet, lacquer dulled by handling, had been sealed and given 3 instructions. Keep it near wine, keep it in light, keep it closed. The student bought it for 3 zlotys and a vow to remove it if it made trouble. He wrote his name, Aaron L., on the underside, where the wood was clean. That evening he drew its front in his notebook and practiced the pomegranates until their seeds looked like small eyes. On the last line he copied the warning and underlined it once. Do not open. He slept with the box in the next room. The house breathed as houses do, so little it might be mistaken for silence. The cabinet went to a narrow room on Franciszkańska, above a cooper who hummed like a hive. The student read what he could about Dybbukim. Lingering voices, borrowed tongues, bargains struck in grief. And Sky's Dybbuk was back across the river. At intermission, he noted the way the stage used prayer like scaffolding. He did not want theater, he wanted a rule. A teacher of practical Kabbalah listened, coughed, and said rituals were locks and meanings the keys. But some doors open inward, he added, and when you push, you're inside. The teacher agreed to refresh the box. No promises, only caution. They laid the cabinet on a cloth, opened it as if handling bread, and set by it a dish of wine and a sprig of myrtle. He examined the braid and the coins without touching them, replaced each precisely, and drew a thin line of candle wax along the seam. What might be called phenomena were small and impolite. A scent of jasmine in a house that could not afford it. A chill against the fingers as if air had muscle. 3 slow knocks at the wrong moment. The teacher chalked letters on the lid that would wash away in rain if they had been outside. He whispered, not prayers exactly, but the grammar by which prayers are held together, and wrote beneath the pomegranates in pencil, for peace. The student slept badly and woke ashamed of his excitement. He loaned the cabinet to a theater friend who wanted a real prop for a small company's Dybbuk. The friend returned it within 3 nights, pale for reasons he would not articulate, pressing a ticket into the student's hand and advising him not to attend. In his notebook, the student wrote, in a new thin hand, "A box behaves like a sentence. Punctuation is mercy." He set the cabinet in his wardrobe and promised the day to other matters. The company on Durga Street rented a back room off a coffee house, a theater the size of a good parlor. Their props came from trunks and cupboards. Their courage came from debt. They mounted the Dybbuk with a care that suggested superstition is a kind of respect. On opening night, the audience sat close enough to hear breath become words and words return to breath. During the graveyard scene, a water glass in the second row cracked with the sound of a small opinion. An actress missed a step and did not fall. The audience exhaled as one body. Later, a stagehand swore he heard knocking from the wardrobe, 3 beats slow, as if a heart had chosen its own cadence. The wardrobe held costumes and, wrapped in shawls, the cabinet. He opened the door and found what one always finds: cloth, wood, dust, and the sense that a thought had left the room a moment before he arrived. The company grew careful in ways that looked like devotion. They salted the threshold, not because salt believes, but because people do. They set a cup of water beside the cabinet and changed it each night. The box never moved unless carried by 2. A visiting critic wrote grandly that the production cracked a window between worlds. The student, who had not attended, read the review and underlined only the verbs. On the 4th performance, the theater friend returned the key and a note. "Your prop cost us a brave girl's voice for an evening and a frightened boy's sleep for 2. No harm, only wait. Take it away." The student did so. Carrying the cabinet through new snow, he felt the lid warm under his fingers, as if a hand had pressed from inside, not to escape, not to frighten, but to make a point about grammar. He placed it back on his wardrobe shelf and wrote on a label, "Kept closed for peace." Spring changed the city's pitch. Newspapers carried fewer ads for theater and more for ships. A cousin in New York sent a letter folded around a ticket with a date too close for comfort. "Bring nothing heavy," the cousin wrote, "and bring everything you are." The student became a packer of words and a chooser of objects, meaning had weight now. The cabinet, once a curiosity, became a question, an heirloom to someone, a lesson to himself, a warning to no one who would listen. He could not abandon it. He could only promise not to open it. On the ship, he shared a cabin with 2 men who slept with their boots near their heads, as if ready to run at a dream. The cabinet rode in his trunk, cushioned with linen and a shirt his mother had ironed into a memory. The Atlantic had many voices, and in most were practical. Engines, plates, a child, a hymn. Some nights a sweetness drifted like a rumor down the corridor. Once the trunk lid pressed upward against its hasp and settled again, the way sleepers adjust blankets. At Ellis Island, a man with a pencil drew a mark on his coat and then on his paper, both wiped off with water and time. In a boarding house on the Lower East Side, he unpacked the cabinet and set it, as instructed, in light. Near wine, closed. He bought a cheap kiddish bottle from a pushcart and filled the cup on Fridays. letting the light through the glass print a ruby circle on the lid. He read proof at a Yiddish paper by day and borrowed books in the public library by night. In his notebook, he copied the warning a second time and underlined it twice, as if repetition might keep the world orderly. Work taught him the American version of worry. Rent due on Tuesday, meat dear on Thursday, the letter that fails to arrive by Saturday. He kept the cabinet on a high shelf as if giving it a view might excuse its exile. In summer, the apartment smelled of warm books and onions. In winter, of steam and coal. The phenomena, if that is what they were, remained minor and precise. A bulb that burst with a blue ring like a saint. The wine cup found empty at dawn when no one had drunk. 2 pennies stacked on the sill where he was sure he had left none. A pawnbroker on Hester Street admired the carving and offered a price too kind. The student said it was not for sale and felt relief that surprised him. He began to write small labels for objects in his room. Chair, window, lamp. As if the act of naming placed gentle weights on things that might otherwise drift. For the cabinet, he made a different label. Kept closed for peace. He taped it inside the door where only the box could read it. On a night of heavy snow, the building's heat failed and the radiator clicked like teeth. He took the cabinet down and wrapped it in his winter coat to keep the wood from bursting. He sat with it as if keeping vigil for a friend who preferred silence. A smell of myrtle visited and left. In the stairwell, someone sang a line from home and forgot the next. Drowsy, he wrote a sentence without subject or verb. If you are here, be a blessing. He woke to the ordinary. Melt water on the sill, a lamp that cooperated, a city already sweeping its own footprints. The cabinet was dry, the wax line unbroken, the label still legible as if someone had read it and agreed. Late in 1928, he found work upstate cataloging a dead man's library in a town where the river ran brown with industry. He packed his books and his labels and left the cabinet with a friend who kept a second-hand shop near Delancey. The friend promised to keep it in light, near wine. Closed. Men are good when given 3 clear rules, and opened a ledger to prove it. The shopkeeper was practical to the edge of poetry. He repaired frames with thread, set clocks to the room's heartbeat, and listened to gossip as insurance. The cabinet became an exhibit rather than an item, drawing shy customers who cupped their hands around the kiddush bottle as if warming themselves. A woman asked if it was for spice or curse. For memory, the shopkeeper said, which is the honest answer to most questions. One evening, a man with sea in his coat and ash in his fingernails brought a sailor's chest and a watch that refused to tick. He asked for wine and did not drink it. He placed his palm on the box and removed it quickly, as if the wood had mistaken his pulse for a message, and answered. He left with a chair and a promise to return. The shopkeeper added his own label beneath the student's, "Not for opening, not for sale." December laid a gray hand on the street. The student wrote from upstate that the river sounded like boiling coins and that he missed the clatter of his windows. He asked his friend to keep the cabinet for the winter. The friend placed it in the front window where it could learn the city's breath. On certain mornings, the glass clouded from the inside as if it had spoken and then been modest about the warmth. He wiped it away with a rag that had once been a prayer shawl, and without thinking, told the box to be at peace. What makes a box a story is not what it contains, but how it travels. In spring, the student returned to the city to find his friend had moved 2 streets over to a shop with more honesty in the floorboard. The ledger survived. The label survived. The cabinet sat where the light behaved. A fire had chosen everything but the windows, the friend said. He carried the box into the lane while smoke made a grammar of the air. It was light, he added, surprised. They agreed to put the cabinet into storage because rest is another kind of obedience. The student wrote a final note and pinned it inside the lid where no eyes would wander. Kept closed, near light and wine. If found, treat as you would a letter addressed to the living and the dead. He added the new shop's address and a request that if peace had been made, it be kept. They sealed the seam with fresh wax and wrapped the hole in paper that had once been a theater poster. In the storage room, the air kept the temper of dust and the patience of rope. On a high shelf among mirrors that disagreed with one another, the cabinet learned to wait. The student married, the shopkeeper moved again. The city changed languages and kept all of them. Decades would pass in which a woman would swear jasmine visits 1 month of the year, and a child would draw pomegranates on school paper without knowing why. Boxes behave like sentences, he had written. Punctuation is mercy. The warehouse man who inventoried the unit in 1957 penciled 3 words beside the entry and underlined them twice. Do not open. Years later, the crate would be sold with other ordinary things. Lamps, a mirror. Someone would carry the cabinet downstairs and feel it lighten, then weigh itself again. A label would fall and be found. A note would be read. Somewhere, in a room without myrtle, a circle of light would print itself on a closed lid, asking nothing but respect.